The Voice of Russia World Service presents another edition of the Voice of Russia Treasure Store.
This time we focus on the outstanding Russian writer Valentin Rasputin and his story, French Lessons. Valentin Rasputin comes from the Siberian village of Ust-Uda in the Irkutsk region. There he spent his childhood in the difficult war and post-war years. In 1959, he graduated from the Historical and Philological Faculty of Irkutsk University. His first book of stories was published in 1961. Rasputin's stories, Money for Maria, The Last Term, and Live and Remember, were tremendously popular and gave rise to lively discussions in the press. The young Siberian writer showed himself to be an astute observer of daily life, with an excellent knowledge of the life of his part of the country and its people. Later he was awarded state prizes for his books. Today you are offered to listen to the first part of the radio play French Lessons after Valentin Rasputin.
It is a strange thing. Why is it that, just as with our parents, we always feel guilty towards our teachers? And not at all because of things in school, no, because of what becomes of us afterwards. In 48, I started going into the fifth form. Or, to be more exact, I travelled it, because our village had only an elementary school, so to continue after the fourth year I had to go 50 kilometres to a small town which was the district centre. Those were still the hungry years, and mother had 3 of us to feed. I was the eldest. In the spring, when things were especially difficult, I swallowed and made my sister swallow the eyes of potatoes and grains of rye and oats. It is difficult to say how mother made up her mind to send me to the town. We had no father, life was a struggle, and I suppose she decided that whatever she did, things couldn't be worse than they were. I'd done well in the village school. I liked studying and had won quite a name for learning. I wrote and read letters for the old folk. I read all the books in our very modest library, and in the evening told the other children tales from them, adding a good bit of my own. At school in town I did well. After all, that was what I had come for. I had no other interests. At that time I always did my best at anything. It was the only way I knew. I could hardly have dared to approach school with a single lesson unprepared. Consequently, I always got the top mark, 5, except in French. My trouble with French was the pronunciation. I could easily remember words and grammar. I translated fast. I coped with all the spelling difficulties, but the pronunciation was blocked by all my Angara forebears back through the generations, none of whom had ever pronounced foreign words, even if they suspected their existence. I rattled out my French after the manner of our village tongue-twisters, swallowed half the sounds as superfluous, and rapped out the other half in short, barking bursts. When our French teacher, Lydia Mikhailovna, listened to me, her face twisted painfully, and she shut her eyes. She had never heard anything like it. Again and again she explained and showed me how to pronounce nasal sounds and vowel combinations, and asked me to repeat them after her, but I only floundered, wooden-tongued. It was just no use. I got so thin that Mother was frightened when she came to visit me at the end of September. I never had enough to eat. In the autumn, Uncle Vanya brought me food fairly regularly, about once a week. But the trouble was, it was never enough. There was only bread and potatoes, and now and then a jar of curds. Being hungry here was quite different from being hungry in the village. There, especially in autumn, you could always find something to grab, pluck, dig up. But here, there was only bare nothing all around. Strange people, strange kitchen gardens, strange soil. One day, it was still September, a friend of mine, Fedka, asked me,
"Are you going to play fires?"
"What's that?"
"It's for money. If you got any, come on and we'll play."
"I haven't any."
"Me too. All right, let's go and watch. You'll see it's grand."
Fedka led me behind the kitchen gardens, then we went past a long ridge thick with nettles, already black and tangled, dangling their bunches of poisonous seeds. We jumped from hummock to hummock across an old tip and went down into a hollow where we saw a cluster of boys on a small level patch. We went closer while they were eyeing us. They were all about the same age as myself, except for one, a tall, strong fellow with a long reddish cowlick on his forehead, who seemed to be the boss there.
"What have you brought him here for?"
"He's all right. Vadik, he lives with us."
"Wanna play?"
"I haven't any money."
"Mind you, if you try to sneak..."
"I don't sneak." Since nobody took any notice of me, I moved closer and watched. They weren't all playing, only 6 or 7. The rest were like me, watching. They all seemed to have a great admiration for Vadik, who was obviously cock of the walk. The game was easy enough to understand. Each player put in 10 kopecks. Then the coins were arranged in a pile, tails upward, on an area bounded by a thick line, a couple of meters away from the kitty, and at the other end by a sunken boulder which served as a footrest when a player threw a round flat stone. It had to be aimed so as to roll as close as possible to the line, but without passing over it. The closest then had the right to break up the kitty. That was done by striking the coins with the same flat stone, trying to tip them so that they would turn over heads up. The whole kitty then went into your pocket and the game began afresh. Vadik was clever. He went last to the boulder when the whole picture was clear and he could see where to throw in order to forge ahead. The money was won by the first. It seldom lasted up to the final players. Probably everyone understood Vadik's cleverness, but nobody dared say a word. It's true he played with skill. At the boulder he would bend his knees slightly, eyes narrowed, aim the stone at the mark, rise with unhurried smoothness, and the stone slid from his hand and went exactly where he had aimed. Nobody else could do that. If only I had had money, I felt I could have played. Back in the village we had played knucklebones, and that too needs a sure eye. In addition, I liked to set myself targets to hit, so skill I had, but I had no money. Mother sent me bread because she had no money, otherwise I could have bought it where I was. But a couple of times Mother had slipped a 5-ruble note into a letter to buy myself milk. The third time I got a 5-ruble note, however, I didn't spend it on milk. I changed it into small coins and went to the tip. The place had certainly been well chosen, a level patch closed in by mounds, not overlooked from anywhere. Back home in the village, where grown-ups could see what you did, you got into bad trouble for gambling, with threats of the headmaster and even the police. But here there was nobody to disturb us. The first time I lost 90 kopecks, the second time 60. I hated seeing the money go, but I felt I was getting my hand in. My fingers were becoming accustomed to the stone. I was learning just how much strength to use as to make it go where I wanted, while my eye could predict where it would fall and how far it would roll. In the evenings, when the others had gone, I would go back, take out the stone which Vadik had hidden under the boulder, get my small change out of my pocket, and go on throwing until darkness fell. In the end, out of 10 throws, the stone came right down on the money 3 or 4 times. At last the day came when I could count my winnings. It was a dry, warm autumn. Although it was October, one could go about in a shirt. Rain fell rarely and seemed almost accidental, blown over by a breeze from some place of bad weather. The sky was summery blue but seemed lower, and the sun sank earlier. When it was clear, the air seemed to shimmer over the low hills, filled with bitter, intoxicating scents of dry wormwood. Distant voices came clearly, and birds were gathering in circling flocks for their migration. The grass of our patch, although yellow and limp, was still soft and alive. The boys not playing, mostly those who had lost, fooled about on it. Now I hurried off there every day after school. The boys changed, some fell out and new ones appeared, only Vadik never missed a game, and indeed without him it never started. He was followed like a shadow by a squat boy nicknamed Chicken, with a big cropped head. Chicken too usually won, not as much as Vadik, but who always left better off than he came. One reason probably was that he was hand in glove with Vadik, who gave him a bit of sly assistance. I won. I had started winning steadily every day. I had worked out my play. Now I had money. But I did not let the game keep me there until evening. I needed a ruble. Just 1 ruble every day. Once I had it, I went off, bought a jar of milk at the market, then I had supper and sat down to my lessons. I still hadn't enough to eat, but knowledge that I was drinking milk gave me strength and eased my hunger. At first, Vadik took my success calmly. It meant no loss to him. I doubt very much if anything from his pocket came my way. But soon he noticed that I left far too quickly, and one day he stopped me.
Hi, you! Grab the kitty and making off. Clever boy, aren't you? Come on, play.
But I have to do my lessons, Vadik.
Lessons? If you want to do lessons, don't come here. Where'd you get this idea you can play for money like that? Look out or you'll win something that you don't want. Get me?
I had to give up. It was no use insisting. If a fight started, not one of them would take my part. Vadik glared at me, eyes angrily narrowed. I stooped, struck the nearest coin, turned it, and moved a second. Again I held the stone to strike, but had no chance to complete the stroke. Somebody behind kneed me hard, and I fell awkwardly, my face striking the ground. Sniggers, I turned. Chicken stood behind me, grinning.
Give me that.
Vadik held out his hand for the stone, but I held on to it. Anger had burnt out fears. I wasn't afraid of anything. Why did they do that to me? What for? What had I done to them?
Give it here.
You did turn the coin. I saw it. I saw you do it.
You say that again.
You turned it! The first to hit me was Chicken, again from behind. I shot towards Vadik, who quickly, accurately, without taking aim, smashed his head into my face. I fell with blood spurting from my nose. I was barely up when Chicken went for me again. I could have broken away and run, but for some reason I never thought of it. I was tossed between Vadik and Chicken, hardly defending myself, my hand over my nose with the blood pouring from it, and desperately, furiously, stubbornly, I kept on shouting, "You turned it! You did! You did!" They hit me in turn, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. Some third boy, small and vicious, kicked my legs. Afterwards, I found they were black and blue. My one thought was not to fall whatever happened. Even in those moments, I felt that that would be a disgrace. But in the end, they did get me down and stopped.
Get out before I kill ya! Get out! Just try to blab, I'll kill ya!
In all the world that day, there was no one more miserable than I. In the morning, I looked at myself in the mirror, appalled. My nose had swollen up like a potato. I had a black eye, and below it, on my left cheek, was a blood-filled bruise. How could I go to school looking like that? But go I must. I couldn't miss, whatever had happened. I slipped into the classroom, covering my eye with my hand, sat down at my desk and dropped my head. Of course, the first lesson had to be French. Lydia Mikhailovna, our form mistress, was particularly alert, and it was difficult to hide anything from her. She would come in and say good morning, but before she told us to sit down, she would always look at each one of us with remarks which, although couched in joking form, were meant to be obeyed. Of course she noted the indications on my face at once. However, I tried to hide them. I saw that by the way the others began to turn and look at me.
Well, I see we've got a wounded here with us today. What's happened to you?
I fell down.
Dear me, how unfortunate. Was it yesterday or today?
Today. No, I mean yesterday when it was dark.
He fell down. It was Vadik from the 7th gave it to him. They were gambling and he started to argue and got it. I saw it. And now he says he fell down.
It was something else I wanted to ask you. Come up to the board, since you want to talk, and get ready to answer.
My worst fear was that Lydia Mikhailovna would take me to the headmaster. But what could I say? Better if they expelled me at once. As I thought of that, it flashed through my mind that then I could go home, but I took fright, as though I'd burnt myself. No, I couldn't go home in disgrace. Another thing if I dropped school myself. After school, I waited for Lydia Mikhailovna in the corridor, half dead with fear. She came out of the teacher's room and nodded to me to follow her into the classroom.
Is it true you've been gambling?
It's true.
Well, did you win or lose? Come on, tell me how it was. Lost, I suppose.
No, I won.
Well, that's one good thing anyway. So, you've been winning. What did you do with the money? Come on, what did you do with the money you won? Buy sweets? Did you buy books? Are you saving up for something? Well, you must have a lot by now.
No, not much. I only win a ruble.
And then you don't play anymore?
No.
And the ruble? Why just a ruble? What do you do with it?
I buy milk.
Milk?
She sat looking at me in silence, and I felt through all my skin that under the gaze of her eyes with that slight cast, all my awkwardness seemed to become enormous and swollen with an ill power. Of course, there was something for her to look at. A thin, awkward boy with a battered face, fidgeting in front of her, motherless, unkempt, lonely, in an old washed-out jacket with sagging shoulders fitting over the chest but with sleeves far too short, in limp pale greenish pants made over from his father's riding breeches, tucked into the rough slippers called Cherokee and bearing traces of yesterday's fight. I had already noticed Lydia Mikhailovna's interested glance at my Cherokee. Nobody else in our form wore them. It was only the following autumn, when I refused point blank to wear them to school any longer, that Mother sold the sewing machine, our only treasure, and bought me rough top boots.
All the same, you shouldn't play for money. You can manage without somehow, can't you?
Yes, I can. To be truthful, things were very bad for me those days. The autumn was a dry one. The collective farm had completed its grain deliveries early, and Uncle Vanya didn't come anymore. I was constantly hungry. Even in my sleep, I could feel waves of dry cramps in my stomach. Hoping to find other gamblers, I started investigating the neighbouring streets, wandering about the wastelands, watching the boys who went to the hills. But it was all no good. The season was over, ended by the cold October winds. It was only in our former space that the boys still gathered. I hung about nearby, saw the stone gleaming in the sunshine, saw Vadik brandishing his arms as he ordered the others about, and the familiar figures bending over the kitty. In the end, I couldn't hold out and went down. I knew that this was humiliation, but it was no less humiliation to reconcile myself once and for all to being beaten up and driven away. The main driving force was my hunger. I needed a ruble, not for milk, but for bread. And I knew no other way to earn it.
Now, what have you come here for? Want some more of the same?
I've come to play.
And who said we want you?
Nobody.
Hoy, boys, shall we give it to him now, or wait a bit? Can't you see? Here is a fella come to play. Maybe he wants to win 10 rubles of each of us.
You haven't got 10.
We've got more than you think. Put yours down and shut up. Boys, let him play.
I decided to play cautiously and not make any big killing. I threw the stone fearing to hit the money by accident, then quietly struck the separate coins with a glass to make sure Chicken wasn't behind me. Those first days I didn't venture to think of a ruble. 20 or 30 kopecks for a piece of bread, that was better than nothing. That was what I wanted. But of course the end was sure. On the 4th day, when I had won a ruble and wanted to go, I was beaten up again. True, this time the beating was less, but the traces showed in a badly swollen lip. I had to bite it all the time in school. But Lydia Mikhailovna saw it, whatever I did. She called me up to the blackboard and made me read a French text. Even with 10 good lips, I couldn't have got the pronunciation right. And with one swollen, there was no chance at all.
Stop. Oh, stop. What's this meant to be? No, I'll have to give you extra tuition. There's simply no other way out.
That was the start of rackingly uncomfortable days. Right from the morning, I was apprehensively waiting the time when I should have to remain alone with our teacher, Lydia Mikhailovna, and break my tongue in the effort to repeat after her the French words invented for torment. I am ashamed now to remember how alarmed and embarrassed I was when Lydia Mikhailovna, our lesson finished, called me to supper. Ravenous as I had been just before, that invitation drove all appetite out of me. I jumped and mumbled something about having eaten, not wanting anything, while I tried to edge along the wall towards the door. I turned and ran. This happened several times until Lydia Mikhailovna gave up and stopped inviting me to table. I breathed more freely. Then one day I was told there was a parcel down in the cloakroom for me. A man had brought it. I could hardly hold out until the end of lessons, and then I rushed down. Our school cleaner pointed to a white plywood box, the kind used for parcel post, standing in a corner. That surprised me. Why the box? Mother usually sent food in an ordinary sack. Perhaps it wasn't for me at all. No, there was my name and my class written on top. I couldn't wait to get home to find out what was inside. Not potatoes, of course. For bread it was too small and inconvenient too. Besides, she had sent bread only a little while before. I still had some. What was in it then? I looked inside and stared stupefied. There, on top, covered by a neat sheet of paper, lay macaroni. That was something. The long yellowish spaghetti lying closely, evenly, were rare wealth to my dazzled eyes, better than anything I could imagine. Now it was clear why Mother had found a box, so that the macaroni wouldn't be broken and crushed. But macaroni? Yes, where had she got it? There'd never been any in the village. You couldn't buy it for any money. What did it mean then? Hastily, in hope and despair, I pushed the macaroni to one side and beneath it found several big pieces of loaf sugar and 2 slabs of hematogene. That settled up. The parcel wasn't sent by Mother. But who then? I looked at the top again. Yes, my class, my name. Queer, very queer. So that was it. If you won't sit down to table, you get the food sent home. Nothing doing. It could not be anyone else. When I edged in sideways, Lydia Mikhailovna put on a look of bewilderment as I set the box down in front of her.
What's that? What have you brought? What for?
It was you.
What was me? What are you talking about?
You sent this to school. I know it was you.
Why do you think I sent it?
Because we never have macaroni at home. Or hematogene either.
What? Never?
No, we never have it. You ought to have known.
Yes, it's right. I ought to have found out. How could I have neglected it? But it was difficult to guess. Honestly, I've always lived in towns. So you never have it, you say? Well, what do you have then?
Peas and winter radish.
Peas. Winter radish. In the Kubain we have apples. I wanted to go to the Kubain this year, but somehow I came here instead. Look, don't be angry with me. I meant it for the best. Who'd have guessed I could give myself away with macaroni? Never mind, I'll know better. But come on, take the macaroni.
No.
Now, why are you like that? I know you don't get enough to eat. And I live alone and I've got plenty of money. Don't argue with me. I know. I've spoken to your landlady. So what's bad about it if you take that macaroni and make yourself a good supper? Why can't I help you just once? I promise not to send any more parcels, but at least take this one, please. Look, if you're going to study, you must have enough to eat.
Her voice began to have a soporific effect. I was afraid she might over-persuade me. I was angry with myself because I knew she was right, and because I wouldn't let myself accept it. Shaking my head and muttering something, I made a dash for the door. Our lessons didn't stop. I continued to come to Lydia Mikhailovna, but now she really got down to business. She tried once more to make me join her at the table, but there was nothing doing. I stood firm. One day, about a fortnight after the parcel, Lydia Mikhailovna asked me,
Well, don't you play for money anymore? Or do you all get together somewhere to play? What was the game? Come on, how did you play?
What do you want to know it for?
Well, just for interest. When I was a child, we used to play too. I was wondering if it was the same game. Tell me, don't be afraid.
I told her, saying nothing, of course, about Vadik, chicken, and the small tricks I use in playing.
No, I've never heard of fires before. We used to play chica. Do you know it?
No?
Look here. Come here, look. I strike a coin against the wall. Okay, then you strike. But remember, you've got to make your coin fall as close to mine as you can. And to measure, you must reach both coins with the fingers of one hand. Sometimes we call it measures. If you can reach both, you've won. Come on, try it.
I struck, but my coin fell on its edge and rolled away into a corner.
Now you begin. But another thing, if my coin touches yours, even with the edge, I win double. That's chica, I suppose from chiknu, to touch. Do you understand?
Nothing hard here.
Shall we play then?
I couldn't believe my ears. Me play with you?
Why not?
But you are a teacher.
Well, and so what? You think a teacher isn't human? Oh, sometimes I get sick of being nothing but a teacher all the time. Teaching and no end to it. Always holding myself back. Mustn't do this, mustn't do that. Sometimes it's good to forget you're a teacher. Or you can turn into a walking must and mustn't until it's boring for real-life people to be anywhere near you. Sometimes I think the most important thing for a teacher is not to take oneself too seriously. To remember that it isn't so very much one can teach after all. When I was a child, I was ready for anything, always getting into scrapes. My parents had plenty of trouble with me. Even now, I often want to run and jump or go chasing off somewhere, or do something that isn't in the program or in the timetable, just something that I want. It isn't when you've lived a great many years that you get old, but when you forget about being a child. I'd like to jump every day. Oh, but our headmaster Vasily Andreevich lives on the other side of the wall. He's a very serious man. He must never know we play chica.
But we aren't playing. You only showed me.
Well, we can play, not for money, but just for fun. All the same, don't give me away to the director, Vasily Andreevich.
Heavens, the things that can happen. It wasn't so long since I'd been terrified that Lydia Mikhailovna would take me to the headmaster for gambling, and now she was asking me not to give her away. A miracle, nothing else. I looked about me scared, although I couldn't have said why, and blinked in confusion.
Well, shall we try? We can stop if you don't like it.
All right.
All right.
We picked up our coins. I could see that Lydia Mikhailovna really had played, While I was just getting my eye in, I was not yet clear how to make the coin strike the wall on its edge or flat, or how much force I needed. My strokes were blind. If we had been reckoning, I'd have lost plenty in the first minutes, although actually there was nothing so very difficult about Chica. And of course it was embarrassing to be playing with Lydia Mikhailovna, and that added to my awkwardness. I could never have dreamed of it. It took time before I got myself in hand, and when I did and began to give my attention to the play, then real play, Lydia Mikhailovna stopped it.
No, this isn't interesting. If we're going to play, then real play. We're just like 3-year-olds.
But that'll be gambling.
Of course. Look, nothing else takes the place of play for money. That's both good and bad. We can make the stakes quite small, but all the same there'll be interest, excitement, a thrill. You're not really afraid, are you?
Not likely. I'm not afraid of anything. I had some small change with me. I gave Lydia Mikhailovna her coin and got my own from my pocket. All right, Lydia Mikhailovna, we'll gamble if that's what you want. I didn't start it. Vadik, too, thought nothing of me at first, but then he changed his mind and used his fists. I learnt there, I can learn here. This isn't French, and in time I'll bridle that French too. I had to agree to one condition. Since Lydia Mikhailovna's hand was bigger and her fingers longer, she measured with thumb and middle finger, while I used thumb and little finger. That was fair, and I agreed. We began again. We moved from the room to the entry, where there was more space, and struck against the smooth wooden partition. We struck, got down on our knees, crawled about the floor, bumping into one another, stretching our fingers to measure, then getting up again while Lydia Mikhailovna announced the reckoning. She played noisily, squealed, clapped her hands, teased me. In fact, she was more like a schoolgirl than a teacher. I wanted to yell at her sometimes, but all the same she won and I lost. Before I knew where I was, I had lost 80 kopecks. With great difficulty I reduced it to 30, but then Lydia Mikhailovna's coin fell onto mine, which brought my debt up to 50 again. I began to worry. We had agreed to settle up at the end of the play, but if it went on like this, I soon wouldn't have enough. I had a little over a ruble, so I mustn't let it pass the ruble, or I'd be disgraced, a lifelong disgrace. Suddenly I saw that Lydia Mikhailovna wasn't trying to win. When she measured, her fingers were bent. Where she said she couldn't reach the coin, I reached it without any difficulty. I rose offended. No, I said, I won't play like this. It isn't fair.
But I really can't reach it. My fingers are sort of wooden.
You can.
Oh, all right, I'll try.
I don't know how it is in mathematics, but in life the clearest proof comes from the opposites. When I saw the next day that Lydia Mikhailovna slyly moved a coin closer so as to touch it, I was thunderstruck. Somehow or other, she didn't seem to notice when she looked at me that I had seen her obvious cheating, and she went on moving the coin. What are you doing?
Me? What do you mean?
Why did you move it?
I didn't. It was right here.
Of all things, and a teacher too. I'd seen for myself, 20 centimeters away, that she had touched the coin, and there she was insisting that she hadn't touched it, and laughing at me too. Did she think I was blind, or a small kid, a teacher of French? I forgot completely that only yesterday she had been trying to make me win, and only watched to see that she didn't cheat. Lydia Mikhailovna, indeed. That day we spent only 15 or 20 minutes on French, and after that it was even less. We had another interest. Lydia Mikhailovna would have me read a passage, correct me, hear me once again, and then we would start play. After 2 small losses, I started to win. I soon got the idea of Chica. I probed all its secrets and knew where and how to strike. So I had money again. I could go to the market and buy milk, now in frozen cakes. I carefully cut the cream off the top of the disc, pushed the crumbling icy fragments into my mouth, and felt its filling sweetness in my whole body. Then I turned the disc upside down and with my knife hacked off the sweetish bottom. The rest I thawed and drank with a piece of bread. So that was all right. I could manage. And very soon, when the war damage was repaired, things would be better for everyone. Of course, I felt uncomfortable taking money from Lydia Mikhailovna, but I told myself it was fair play. I never asked to play. It was always her suggestion. I did not venture to refuse. I thought she enjoyed it. She was cheerful and laughed and pulled me about. If we could have known beforehand how it was all going to end. Kneeling in front of one another, we were arguing about the Count. I believe we'd been arguing about something else before that too.
Get it into your fat head. Why would I trick you? I'm doing the counting, not you. I know better. I lost 3 times running, and before that there was Chica.
I don't count that.
Why not?
You had Chica too. We were shouting, interrupting each other, when all of a sudden we heard a surprised, if not appalled, but firm, ringing voice.
Lydia Mikhailovna.
We froze. Our headmaster, Vasily Andreevich, was standing in the doorway.
What's the matter with you? What's going on here?
I should have expected you to knock before coming in, Vasily Andreevich.
I did knock. Nobody answered. What's going on here? Will you please explain? I have the right to know as headmaster.
We're playing Chica.
You? Playing for money? With him? Gambling with a pupil? Have I understood you rightly?
Yes.
You? I'm at a loss for words. Your conduct. It's a crime. Corruption. Perversion. And, listen, I've worked in schools for 20 years. I've seen many things in my life. But this...
Three days later, Lydia Mikhailovna left. On her last evening, she met me after school and walked home with me.
I'm going back to the Kubань. You continue your studies. Don't worry. Nothing will happen to you for this foolish business. I'm the one to blame. So, study and do well.
I never saw her again. In the middle of winter, just after the January holidays, a parcel came to the school by post. When I opened the box, I saw macaroni lying in neat rows. Under them, in a wrapping of cotton wool, were 3 red apples. Up to that time, I'd seen apples only in drawings, but I guessed what they were.
That was the second part of a radio adaptation of a story, French Lessons, by the outstanding Russian writer Valentin Rasputin. And here are the names of those who took part in preparing the program. The director was Vladimir Dyomin, the narrator Richard Alibekov, Lydia Mikhailovna was Svetlana Yekimenko, and Vasily Andreevich Yevgeny Pritov. The story was adapted by Margarita Keller.